Hello, everybody, and welcome along. I'm going to start that again because you glitched.
It's all right.
It's all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome along to episode 5 of season 3 of the Game of Two Halves podcast. I'm your host, Sean Watson. Joining me once again on the line from Southport is Kieron Dobson. Kieron, welcome along. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Cheers. Thanks for asking, Sean. Weather's starting to turn for the worse now, so
Yeah.
Indoor weather now. Winter's coming.
It's getting a bit rough, isn't it? How have you filled your international break?
With the Masters.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Just recording this podcast just after the final put's gone down. Any golf fans out there, you'll know, but Dustin Johnson won his second major by an absolute canter, to be honest. Ran away with it. Good substitute for the international break. It was timed well this year, the Masters. No football was missed. Perfect slot. Filled 4 days of the international break. Couldn't have asked for any more, really.
So no, I'm happy with it. Again, Wales played earlier, and I just followed the game on my phone, and England are playing now and losing 2-0 to Belgium, so all's good with me. I'll probably finish it off with a bit of NFL tonight, but that'll be it then.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so let's get right into it if you're ready. Let me just double check the topics and let's see what we're going to lead off with. So it's been a week since we came to you, and we meant to come to you in the week, but scheduling conflicts sort of dictated that it's a Sunday night job. It's how it is in the prima donna pro world, I'm afraid. But what we wanted to talk about was sort of the talk of the town last week, and that was the handball rule and the variations of it and whether it's too strict and all the permutations of it. So last week, I think it was Wolves against Leicester at the King Power. Max Kilman was penalised for a handball that 2 years ago, even probably last season, it wouldn't have been given. It was played against him from 2-3 yards away at speed. Couldn't get his hand out of the way, but this season, these types of decisions are starting to be given as penalties. And then fast forward into the second game of the Super Sunday, it was Joe Gomez who was in the same spot, and Kevin De Bruyne across hit Joe Gomez's hand as he was pulling away. But as I said, this sort of day and age dictates that is a penalty. Both penalties were given. Both penalties were missed, incidentally. There were 2 penalties in the Wolves-Leicester game, weren't there? Stand corrected. Anyway, both penalties were given, but we just wanted to discuss that and whether we think that's fair. Is there going to be a move away from that? What's your sort of take on that, Kieron?
I actually think, so obviously we've talked about the handball rule before this season, because obviously there was quite a lot to talk about, particularly the first few games of the season before they made the changes to the rule. I think about 3 games in, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There were some really bad ones being.
It was after the Eric Dyer one, I seem to remember.
Yeah, I think that was the one where I think the FA realised that they needed to step in. And I have to be honest, probably an unpopular opinion, I think they've done an okay job of it. The one was probably harsh, but I have to say that given that happened in the early kickoff on Sunday, I was pleased that they gave the one against Gomez, because it implies that there's an element of consistency there.
Yeah, they had to, didn't they?
I think the Gomez one was a handball, and I would have wanted a penalty if I was a City fan in that scenario.
Is that your Liverpool bias coming out? No, you sure?
Honestly, because the thing is, I think everyone and their dog is kicking off about the handball rule at the minute. Obviously, if you're watching the games, you've got Carragher spitting into the microphone.
A little bit what I'm doing right now, to be honest.
Yeah, well, he is. He's fuming about it, frothing, you might say. Neville's always got something to look really upset about and disappointed, as though he's been let down. But yeah, there's a lot of people talking about it. So if you're watching the game, even if you don't think anything when you watch it, you're being told sort of what to think. I think, again, there's been some really bad ones this season, but I think since they made the rule change, the thing that they still have to consider, I understand people don't want to see what, a lot of people consider to be soft penalties, but if I'm the attacking team, if a player's arm prevents a goal scoring opportunity, I want something for it. The Gomez one, I think you could say it was harsh, but it does block a goal scoring opportunity. De Bruyne's cross is good. And I know that he's not had much time to react, but his arms out here. And I know it's in the natural running position. I know you can make a case and say there's not an awful lot you can do about it, but I just think that something has to be done about it. And I think
a lot's made about the silhouette, isn't it?
Yeah, the point I would make about it is that if you go back, I don't know if it was last year's fixture at Anfield or the one the year before, there was a Liverpool goal that came from a counter attack.
Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah.
Fabinho, it was last season.
Yeah, so he didn't mean it, but it prevented a potential goal scoring opportunity for City. Liverpool go up the other end of the score. That wasn't fair either. I do think there has to be something for attacking teams. I do think a penalty is a bit too much of a reward.
So what, indirect free kick for that? You can't add... Where'd you go from it? Incidentally, it was the Guardiola game where he's giving it the... I just remember on the touchline. But yeah, so where do you go from it? If a penalty is too harsh, you start tiptoeing around indirect free kick. If it's accidental handball, it's difficult to say, isn't it? And then you get into a bit of grey area.
It's funny because indirect free kicks, any listeners who were not 90s babies probably are not that familiar with seeing direct free kicks being taken inside the box. Whereas I think early 2000s, me and you will probably remember quite a lot happening those days. But there have been a thing in the past. But I actually saw on one of the BT goal shows for the Champions League, there was one in I think it was the Porto Marseille game, or something along those lines. There was one in that game that led to a goal actually, and it was a welcome because quite often they didn't lead to goals. They often just hit,
It was too crowded, wasn't it?
Yeah, hitting the wall. This one went above it and it deflected in. But I will say, I did put a bit of thought into this, and obviously one of our lost podcasts from the summer was
one of the many
where we were talking about different innovations or ideas we'd like to see in the game. One that I was thinking about, and it's probably a bit mental, but I wonder whether you could break the box down or extend the 6-yard box, maybe push it out to the 12-yard line or the 10 yards.
Well, and you say penalty inside there, anything else is sort of an indirect.
A free kick.
It's something to consider. I don't think it'll ever happen, I've got to say.
No, it won't.
And because there hasn't been a radical change to the game in hundreds of years, so it just won't happen. But I hear what you're saying.
Oh.
Bar VAR and barring maybe and the pass back rule maybe, but in terms of like changing the parameters of the pitch, it just hasn't happened, does it?
No, it won't happen, and I agree. Again, there's too much obsession with tradition in football, but I mean in English as well, British culture too. But I will say again, I think that you could make the case that a handball inside that zone is more likely to be a goal scoring opportunity, whereas one that's maybe blocking across just inside the box, that's not the same. There should be a distinction between the two. So I would like to see that happen. It'll never happen, but with it being the case that it won't happen, I think that they've just got to keep doing what they're doing now. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to the same thing, and it's what is deliberate handball, because that's still in the wording. I think it's not just if it hits your hand, it's a penalty. If it doesn't, it isn't. There is still that grey area, and it does still come down to referees' judgment. Whether that's the VAR referee or the on-field referee, it is still that judgment call. It isn't, and it still isn't. If it hits your hand, it's handball, and if it doesn't, it isn't. Maybe it does need to become black and white.
You can't black and white whether it's something's deliberate, though, can you?
And you never can. So you need to take the word deliberate out of it, maybe, because it's getting to the point now where deliberate. What is deliberate?
But that's almost what they did at the start of this season, and that 3 games in, they then did a youth. I think they've messed about a bit. I like that they've made this change, again 3-4 games into the season, but I think they're in dangerous territory if they change the rules again this season. Because at that point, Spurs have lost 2 points in that game against Newcastle. Yeah. Then they'll start tallying up and say, "Oh, well, you've changed the rules twice now, and that's 2 points we'll never get." So they can't do anything this season now. Again, the Kilman one definitely wasn't deliberate in my opinion. There was literally nothing he could have done about it, and I think the ball was so close, his arm was so close to his body, as Carragher kept saying. and I think he was right to say that. Whereas the Gomez one, his arm, and again, I know Carragher made the point again, but the arm was close to his body, but his arm was out, and it hits a point of his arm that wouldn't be by the sleeve.
But he was pulling it away as well. That there was a similar one. I don't know if you remember it, but Michael Carrick against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge about 12 years ago. Ballack scored the penalty, the winner. Same, honestly, because I was I was fuming at the time because I thought he's pulling his arm away. It's the same instance. I think there was a bit more distance between Carrick and the ball. Same sort of scenario though, and I was annoyed then, and that's what 12 years ago.
I think the bottom line is with the handball rule is that they're never going to please everyone with it.
No, I know.
I don't think they're going to see any improvements on it because, as you said, they're so resistant to change in football. Yeah. I think there was always going to be the case that when you introduce VAR that you were going to potentially get more penalties because the VAR system was picking up on the ball hitting the hand more, but. Again, I think we're just going to have to sort of swallow the pill, to be honest.
So where does slow motion come into it then? Because there's a lot said about playing a replay back at real speed. Should a referee see a slow motion replay?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I don't think so with... Certainly not with handball. There's an argument to be made about fouls in the box, but then you need to see if the guy makes contact with the ball, and you do need to slow it down a little bit to make sure that you see that contact. But with handball... When it's clearly at his hand, I don't think the referee should even see a slow motion replay because the game isn't played in slow motion.
Yeah.
And slow motion makes everything look 10 times worse than it is. So I think maybe that might be a start. Take the slow motion replays away and see what happens from there.
Particularly with the handball rules, because if you are slowing down the replay, all you're really doing is slowing it down to look at whether it hits the arm. But you can even see that almost in a full speed one. But what you really want to see, which you would get with full speed, which you don't get with slow mo, is you'd be able to see whether there was any intent or
the thing is,
the defender could do.
The on-field referee doesn't need to see the slow mo because the guy in the truck can watch the slow mo to check if it hits his arm, and then if he goes, you need to come and see this.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. So maybe that's somewhere to start. It's interesting anyway. Incidentally, who's the best indirect free kick taker of all time?
Have you got an answer? Because I haven't.
I think so, yeah. In my mind, I've got Alan Shearer.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're correct. Yeah. Now you say it, I can think of at least in my head, whereas I can't for anyone else.
The one that sticks in my mind is Sheringham over the ball, back heel, Shearer sort of in off the crossbar at Wembley. That sticks in my mind. Just thought I'd ask the question anyway.
No, it's a good one.
So we mentioned Gomez and Liverpool there. Obviously, that game finished 1-1 between City and Liverpool last Sunday. Since then, Gomez has been injured with England. Andy Robertson's been injured with Scotland, I think today or last night. And Mo Salah's been struck down with coronavirus. I don't know when the vigil is, the candlelit vigil for them, but that is a lot of players that they have got on the shelf now for one reason or another. I'm starting to come around to your way of thinking that Liverpool might actually be done at this point with this amount of injuries, depending on Robertson and Alexander-Arnold and Gomez and Salah getting back quicker than expected. But the diagnosis for Arnold, I think, is 6 weeks. Salah's obviously a couple of weeks minimum. Don't know about Robertson yet, and Gomez, we're not sure. So the outlook is bleak at best for Liverpool, isn't it?
Yeah, I said before the injuries that happened in that game and since with the international break that they were going to struggle because, again, two of the most important players, particularly defensively, were Van Dijk and Fabinho. If you could say there were two players, maybe it'd be Van Dijk and Alisson, but I mean, Fabinho would be high up the list of two players they really couldn't afford to be without. Obviously, Salah, Mane, excellent players too. But they're really they've been struck down now, and it's not going to get much better. I still think they'll get by. Again, I've said on the podcast that they're done. They're not going to win the league, but they're still going to be in the top two probably. Klopp will get them. A few points here and there. And they've still got a lot of top class players that are available to him. And I think, the fact that they're defending the Premier League will mean that, they'll be sort of invigorated by that, and there'll be like a spirit that comes with, we're all in this together. And so I think they'll be okay. But with that said, before we go into the injuries, because I do want to talk about that, but I still think City will have far too much for them this year. But with that said, following on from the conversation we had in the last podcast, the excellent team they are. I think they'll win the league this year. But I have to say, they should have beaten that Liverpool team, and it shouldn't have been a close game really. City had Laporte back, and they got Diaz now, and they actually looked good in that game together, I thought, for the most part, and they'll be fine. But that game, Gabriel Jesus, granted he's not 100% fit, but he's fit enough, and he's shown that with a good goal.
Do you think he meant it? Do you think he meant the turn?
I think he probably did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he did. I thought, to be honest, there's more about that turn is believable than the Dennis Bergkamp one from 18 years ago.
I subscribe to them both being deliberate.
I do, but I always think
they're both executed so well it doesn't matter, does it? But I will say, again, really well taken goal, and again back to the conversation we had last week. Gabriel Jesus being back for them, or having Sergio Aguero fit is obviously going to be a big difference maker for City this year. But they had him fit, and again, really well taken goal. But I mean, they should have tested that defence far more, and they really didn't. It speaks to the lack of edge that City have, and I think this is reason why they're not so good in Europe. Pep overthinks it in these big games. The big players, the ones you cream over, you Kevin De Bruyne's, just don't ever in these games really turn up. You missed a pen. They had one the year they did win the league at Anfield, late on penalty. Mahrez missed it. Yeah. They're just so mentally weak. And again, they'll win the league because they've got so many top quality players and the manager's excellent. But as a City fan, it must be sort of tough to watch that. You would have wanted to put Liverpool away there and sort of lay down a marker for the season, not Liverpool's confidence sort of thing. But they didn't do that. If anything, Liverpool came out of that game for. We're still in this.
Well, Liverpool went sort of 3 sheets to the wind, didn't they? Played 4-2-4 essentially. Chucked everything at City. All right, they didn't get it, but they didn't get punished for going that bold. So yeah, they sort of missed a chance to punch Liverpool on the nose there. I do hear what you're saying. So we mentioned the injuries. How much of the injuries, across the board, not just Liverpool, but how much of that is down to clubs being limited to just the 3 substitutions for this season, post or during the coronavirus pandemic?
It's going to be difficult to say, isn't it? 'Cause we'll never know what the world would have looked like if we'd had 5 subs, but it's hard to imagine it wouldn't have led to less injuries. I think particularly the other thing that I think that I've been meaning to bring up on every podcast this season, but I keep forgetting, is yes, I personally think they should have stuck with 5 subs. I think that would have led to less injuries. And I think that even the clubs that voted against it because they were worried that the top clubs, not even the top 6, would have had an advantage because they've got bigger squads. I think even they might be starting to regret it. But the other thing, I think it was really short-sighted when you add in the fact that after the restart last year, granted it was the summer, but they had the breaks halfway through each half, which I actually think maybe they should have taken into consideration at the start of this season because, yes, it's not as hot, but it stands to reason that after coming back and playing, was it 2 months of football-ish?
What was it, mid-June to end of July, beginning of August? Yeah, so about.
So that, combined with the fact that some of those teams then went and played in European competitions and then they've not really had a proper pre-season, they should have taken that into consideration too because...
Do you think that does have an effect? If they're still going to be playing the minutes and the frequency of the games?
Because I think that it's the continuous strain that you put yourself under. If you took away half time, by that, with that logic, you could take away half time and say, well, they're playing for 90 minutes. They'll be fine. I watch a lot of American sports. They break it down into quarters.
Yeah.
They play less minutes, but it's high intensity. So it is about,
Yeah, but they've also got the rolling subs as well, haven't they, in basketball?
Yeah. And again, obviously in NFL.
Yeah, two different teams, yeah.
Yeah. But again, they go to that, I know there's still injuries there. but they go to those lengths because to protect the players, and really what you want is all the players fit, because the more fit players, the better product. Now, it's going to be suffering. Liverpool will feel it, that the players they're missing. Obviously, City aren't as injury hit, but Aguero and Gabriel Jesus will get injured again. He's an injury-prone player. They need to think about buying a new striker. But, all the teams in the league, but we can go down to the bottom teams as well. Burnley, I don't know which way they voted where the subs are concerned, but I bet they regret it if they voted against it now, because they've got one of the thinnest squads in the league. If they go down this year, I think they'll really regret not going to 5 subs.
But that might be why they voted against it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to sort of provide the counter argument to it, because I told you off air that I don't agree that they should have gone 5 subs. I think 3 subs is enough, and I think that if you're worried about injuries piling up, use your squad from the beginning. You don't need to pull Salah off at 60 minutes. Sometimes only playing for the last 30. If your squad's good enough that you can be bringing on a massive subs at half-time or an hour in, then surely it's good enough to start the odd game and to give your starting 11 a bit of a break on that front. If you've got a big enough squad and a good enough squad, you should be able to do that from the beginning. So the second point is I do think it would benefit the bigger teams. People are seeing playing in Europe and playing in all the cup competitions as a disadvantage. No, that's just part of it. If you're good enough to qualify for these extra competitions, the Europa League, the Champions League, you go deep in the FA Cup, the League Cup, that's just par for the course. You've got to be expected to use your squad and play all these games. Or if you're not happy with using the squad and having to put players out 2-3 times a week, don't play in the competitions. That's just how it is. 3 subs, giving them 5 would give the bigger teams an advantage, because they could rotate the squad more. They could progress further in Europe, probably. But the fact that there's more quality coming off the bench as well, whereas somebody like Burnley, who, as you say, have got a thin squad, they'd be sticking the reserves out if it goes to 5 subs. They haven't got enough players, good players.
If some of their key players get injured in the next few weeks or months, and then they don't have them all season, then they're in real trouble, aren't they?
Yeah, but Burnley have got more or less a normal schedule, haven't they?
Yeah, but regardless, if Chris Wood or Dwight McNeil or Tarkowski get injured, they're done.
Yeah, but that's the same with 3 or 5 subs.
No, but yeah, you say that, but again, if they can rotate them and give them a break.
But they can rotate them. They can rotate them from the start.
Can they? Burnley can't go into any game and think we can't try and get something out of this game. The only way they can do it is they go to the big teams and then they sacrifice it, which no one ever wants to see. We all want to see everyone try and beat the big teams. So in a way, you sort of, again, if Burnley if the squad's thin, they go to Chelsea and they set up to lose. They're going to lose most of those games, and then you let in the big teams rotate. In those games, they're thinking, well, Burnley will have to rotate, or they're going to be knackered now. I think they do have to protect the players. I think it's a players' league, and I think they have to make sure they're giving them every chance. Just because, as well, we're going to have a condensed season this year. They're insisting on playing the European Championships this summer.
Yeah,
I think they've knocked back the African Cup of Nations, so that's still going to go ahead, and they've got the World Cup the year after. There's not going to be a normal pre-season for a few years. It's just really short-sighted, and I think a lot of the.
But they voted for it, didn't they? So.
Yeah, I honestly think the teams, the bottom half of the league, will come to regret it. We talk.
No, Kieran, we've forgotten the main point. It's no good for fantasy football 5 subs. It would kill us.
Yeah, but it's not as important as the actual thing.
Yeah, well, it is. It is sometimes. No, I'm obviously joking.
If you're a United fan, the only final thing I would say with it is that you mentioned that the good teams have got better quality on the bench, but they've also got better quality on the pitch. So often the changes are like for like, and yes, it's better to have better quality players on the bench to bring on and replace your better quality players. But for United, what's the difference having Donny van de Beek or Pogba on? There's a difference, but it's marginal. Whereas, for the lower league teams, I think the same is true almost. Again, they're not, I mentioned, say, Burnley, Tarkowski, McNeil and Chris Wood. They're not going to be taken off in many games but if they get into a lead, then they can then bring off one of those players and give them half-hour breather. I do think it's short-sighted. I do think that the advantage it would have given the top clubs having 5 subs would have been marginal. I just think it's the way the league's got to go as well. Football, they play a lot of football now. It's a 90-minute game, and a lot of teams playing 2-3 times a week at the minute. That it's going to strain. It's really going to strain.
I mean,
I don't know. I think something should be done.
Maybe you're right. I do disagree for the reasons I've given, but I suppose that's the argument, isn't it? That's the debate to be had. I know you wanted to mention the scheduling. I suppose that does tie in a little bit with injuries and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's nothing I would add really with what I've just said about we've got 2 or 3 international tournaments which can be played in the next 2 years, as well as 1 condensed season if we finish this one on time, potentially 2 if we don't. I just think again, there should have been more thought that went into this. Again, it's not in anyone's interest to have injuries racking up for you good or your bad players. And I don't know. I just think it's basic. Right? Again, that's where I stand anyway.
Okay. I think with the scheduling as well, I think in particular was the scheduling of a European game and then a Premier League game. So a European away trip, we'll get into it a little bit in part 2, but United played Istanbul Başakşehir, I think, away from home on the Wednesday night. Obviously a late trip back from Turkey. And then the Everton game was midday Saturday, whereas Liverpool and City both played Tuesday, Sunday. I don't know what organisational planning goes into that, but that can't be right. That doesn't seem right at all.
It's awful. And I think as well, when you consider that obviously United have been sort of served a bit of a sandwich in that respect, because they wanted to split the Liverpool United games to TV because City aren't a big enough club. But we've really drawn the short straw there. That turnaround coming back from Turkey and then playing the early kickoff.
Yeah.
Okay, we won the game, but that Ollie's saying we've got 3 injuries that have come off the back of that.
Yeah.
And again, if we lost that game, that's a big 3 points. I don't know. It's a bit of pill to swallow, to be honest. But it'll affect a lot of the clubs over the year.
Yeah. It's not just United in isolation. We're not playing sort of the victim card because it is United. If that was the other way, if it was City, that's still not right. And it will have happened lots of times over the years, but I'm glad that somebody like Jurgen Klopp sort of backed Solskjaer's words. But, that's... You sell your soul to the devil a little bit with the price that BT and Sky are paying for these games. It's in their hands, isn't it? It's up to them. They control it. They do what they want to do. And who are the clubs to argue when you're getting £2 billion in your back pocket?
We'll see. I think the next deal that they sign, I think this is something that, just because it's the first time, Mourinho's talked about it a lot over the years, but I do think if the consensus builds, and particularly because we've had the bigger picture project or whatever. I think because now that there's starting to have a discussion about where football's going, I do think the next set of TV deals, that will be a consideration. I think there's going to be more options for the Premier League where they're going to sell. I think Sky and BT would be smart to be a bit more accommodating to the fixture list in the coming years, just because, again, I know right now they've got all the power, but they don't want to really get into a situation where, I don't know, say Amazon or even Netflix or any of the other providers. I think Facebook is even in discussions at some point.
Mad.
They don't want to get into a situation where other companies with as much or if not more money start saying, oh, we'll offer you the same or even slightly less money, but you'll get more freedom over the fixtures. Again, while we're talking about scheduling, we should also say, obviously, it's working out okay. I think obviously we're going to be talking about moving back away from the pay-per-view model.
Yeah, definitely does need to be mentioned. Yeah.
But I think that when we come back, when fans come back to stadiums, I think there's a nice chance there to maybe have a rethink about the scheduling of games for fans. If fans are travelling on a Friday night after work, they should. That should be taken into consideration. Is it possible for fans to get from one end of the country to the other? If not, can we put on travel? If it's on a Sunday and they're playing early kickoff, they're going to be able to get there reasonably. Yeah. These are things that I think would go a long way to fans that go to the games. more than just, saving a tenner on the tickets. They're going to pay whatever it takes to go anyway. But I do think more thought should go into that as well. So
yeah, Newcastle West Ham shouldn't be a midweek evening game. It can't be.
no, yeah,
If you're going to do it, it's got to be a derby, at least a reasonably close game. You can't have 400-mile round, 500-mile round trips for your average Joe. But they will still do it. But it's that level of fairness, isn't it? It's not a case of will they, won't they do it, because of course most people, well, not most people, but a good chunk of away fans for the Premier League clubs will do it. But is it fair? Absolutely not, and it should be taken into account.
Yeah, I think it was one of the things that did get put forward in like the small print of the Project Big Picture. So it's good that the big clubs are. I'm sure the little clubs, if we using that, I'm sure they'll join in on where that's concerned. But I do think again, when the next TV deal is done, they need to consider that as well. Because again, I think as it stands, fans are still being ripped off. So there is still, a way to go where that's concerned. So, yeah, I think we've covered the injuries, haven't we?
I think we've done it. I think we've done it in more depth than we anticipated. So thank you very much for that. We'll bring part 1 to a close just about there. Thank you very much for listening to part 1 and watching it if you have been doing. We're trialling a few new sort of camera production techniques at the minute. I'm looking at you down the GoPro right now, which is a new purchase. And again on Skype. I don't know which camera angles will be used in post-production. But we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to experiment and make it the best we can. So stick with a few sort of glitches that may well happen in production. But thanks for your patience and stick around for part 2 where you'll get all of this. Welcome back to the second part of the Game of Two Halves podcast. Thanks for watching part 1. Greatly appreciated. Thanks for sticking with us with the new sort of camera angles and stuff like that, if they've worked out. If they've not, thanks for sticking with us on Skype the old-fashioned way. Kieron, thanks for your contributions in part 1. And part 2, as always, will be focused on Manchester United. As you know, it is the international break at the minute, but there is some sort of United news to catch up on. We'll start off, though, with discussing United's bounce-back victory at Everton last week at Goodison Park, as we mentioned in the first half, the Saturday lunchtime kickoff. They went a goal down. I think we both probably feared the worst at that point. We haven't discussed this game at all, myself and Kieran, by the way, so this is all sort of new to us. They went a goal down, but responded in sort of fine fashion, really, and cruised home to a nice 3-1 victory. Kieran, give us your sort of 5-word analysis of the game.
Really happy with the reaction.
Yeah? Happy with the reaction. Nice one. Put you on the spot there and you produce. I'm proud of you. Give us a bit more, flesh the bone out for us.
More now. Yeah.
Flesh the bone out for us.
Like you say, went a goal down, about 20 minutes in, just a simple goal. I mean, it was a good goal, but I mean...
It was a long ball, wasn't it?
Yeah. Want to see Wan-Bissaka improve in the air. And, it was just a really well taken finish once Bernard gets it down the ball to feet. But again, I think we've got to get better in the air. Wan-Bissaka wasn't beaten in the air for that, but he was beaten by Bernard in the air at one point in the game.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Is what I'm thinking of it. But, missed the first ball. And then, obviously, really, again, well taken. I've seen some people going at De Gea saying he should have saved it. It was just a really well placed finish.
Right in the corner, wasn't it?
Yeah. Really.
Through the defender's legs. We see it so often. It's almost a cliche at this point.
What you can do is, the momentum's taking you one way as well, and then put it. So really rough start, and you do fear the worst there, just because we're in that. We're in a bad place, I think, as United fans. I think obviously when it came to the season, quite a lot of confidence and feeling like it was going to be a good year, and then you get some good and bad, and you constantly, we're a bit of a yo-yo team in that respect, and then we're just looking for a consistency. But I thought that the response from the squad was really good, but I was really happy with the leadership that Bruno showed.
Silenced me. No, I did say Bruno, to be fair. Didn't say Maguire, but I said Bruno. Yeah. No, good response. Sorry, continue on the path you were going down there.
No, that was it. I thought it was really, just a really good response. shown the character that everyone talks about these days if you come from behind. But we really did. I mean, Everton weren't at the best. They're missing Richarlison. So yeah, not an ideal day for them. That they can pick a stronger 11, but they're still a really good team. They've been good under Ancelotti. So to come from behind away from home, I know obviously away from home isn't the same at the minute.
No, but it still needs to be done.
Yeah, it's easier to win at Goodison without the fans there, because I think the fans get on Everton players' backs quite a lot. So
yeah.
Sometimes a disadvantage for them. But yeah, good response. And again, really well taken first goal from Bruno.
Oh, great. One of my favourite all-time United headers, actually, already. Just sweetly timed.
It was really good. The cross from Luke Shaw. It's mad how good Luke Shaw has looked since we've signed Tellez, isn't it, really? He's a completely different player. And I know he's still not been perfect, he's not been good enough, but he's actually started to show a bit more going forward.
Well, two assists in 2 games, wasn't it? Before he got injured again. I mean, look, he's never been my favourite player, never will be. He falls short defensively, but I mean, since last couple of weeks, he's shown what he can do going forward. Yeah, I've got no complaints about Shaw, to be honest. It was he's been fine, but again, he's injured again, and that's always going to be his downfall, isn't it?
This is the issue, isn't it? Every time he starts to get on a good run again, he gets injured.
Yeah, I mean,
Shaw
incidentally was the one that was begging to sign new players, and and so they signed a left back to probably ultimately replace Shaw. We'll see how it pans out, of course, but that was probably the intention. I wouldn't say an apology to be made on my part, but certainly an admission that Maguire had his best game for us in probably since he signed, or it's certainly up there.
He was in the conversation.
Yeah.
The Chelsea game at Stamford Bridge last year around Christmas.
We scored the header.
Oh, there, yeah. But yeah, he was excellent. That's the best I've seen him play for a long time. He needed that. But...
And again, hands up. Not that they weren't bad the week before, but Fred and McTominay, perfect performance. I thought they were brilliant. But this is the trouble with Fred in particular. You just don't know what you're going to get. No. We've had this conversation, but I mean this in terms of his short passing was crisp the other day, and that has never been. It's so up and down. You just don't know what you're going to get with him, and maybe that reliability is the issue with Fred. But I mean, Saturday, he was arguably the best player on the pitch with McTominay.
I think I would have given the man of the match to. Obviously, you give it Bruno, but I think second in line for me would have been Maguire. I thought he was absolutely excellent. But yeah Fred McTominay, good again. And I think I do, obviously...
It's the intensity, Kieran. It's the intensity with me. And I know this comes probably with playing every game or a good chunk of the games, but the intensity between midweek in Istanbul and Goodison Park was just like watching 2 different teams. Just... aggression on the ball and incisive passage, zipping it into feet instead of being laboured and slow movement, everything like that. And that ultimately was the difference for me between the lacklustre defeat in Europe and the really positive win in the league. Just intensity. It's simple as that.
Yeah. It's hard to put your finger on. Obviously, we've talked about it a lot, the opening couple months of the season, because obviously we've been so up and down. We're beating PSG and then really tidily beating Leipzig, and then really struggling against teams you'd expect us to beat. And I can only imagine that the issue is that, again, the lack of pre-season. I won't go down that road again, but it must have had an impact, and I do think that it's going to lead towards getting. It's going to be a journey, but I think eventually we'll get there. But yeah, Fred again. Played really well. The only thing, again, we're always going to disagree on him, but I think you do know what to expect with Fred. I don't think he ever really changed. It's just whether he suits the game, and against Everton he did. There's some games where he won't. If teams really sit back, he's not going to offer you a lot when he's on the ball. I do think it is that simple with Fred. He presses well. His work off the ball is excellent, and if all he's got to do is recycle possession when he's got the ball, he's great. If you ask him to do any more, i.e., unlock a defence, play Bruno Fernandes in the hole, it's not going to happen. It's not his game. I just think it's that simple. There's some games that suit him, there's some that don't. But yeah, him and McTominay looked excellent, and it was good all round. It was good to see Cavani get his goal at the end.
Yeah.
When we look good, we look really good is the thing. And I think, there will be a lot of people that, if we've got any fans that are stuck on that don't support United to the second half, in the past, you might have thought, we get a bit too giddy about United, and I've been...
We are guilty of that. We are guilty of that.
I've been guilty of it in the past, but I think the thing is with this United team, pretty much Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's United spell, is when we do play well, we do look really good. We don't often win a lot of games purely on chance. We get lucky along the way, that PSG game, but we sort of deserve our luck, and you think, you settled to play that way and you got the result.
I think maybe a way to put it is the Mourinho United didn't really have a high ceiling, but the floor was probably higher as well.
That's a really good, really well put, I think.
Whereas Solskjaer, we have got high ceiling, but also the floor's quite low. So when it's bad, it's terrible, but when it's good, it's great.
Yeah, I would argue the floor hasn't shifted that much lower. Mourinho finished second.
Well, even though the 6-1, I mean, that was a pretty low floor.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we lost 4-0 with Mourinho at Chelsea, and it was a really bad game. We've played bad, under both managers. The result, obviously, the 6-1 stands out, but I think, again, context is everything. And
I know.
I will say, though...
And I mean, I think maybe...
This team...
Sorry, just to cut you off. I think maybe when I say floor, I mean sort of consistency.
Yeah, I hear your point. Again, Mourinho, I think we got to 80-plus points, finished second that year. So I completely understand where you're coming from. But then, do we count Mourinho's third year and consider the floor there where,
I know.
completely hopeless in games, and we go into games, basically try not to lose. So, I don't think we've ever really done that under Solskjaer. I know you would argue we did against Chelsea earlier this season, but I still think we were trying to win. We were trying to scrape by, whereas there were Mourinho games where he would have been over the moon with an 0-0, it felt like, or even sometimes, just losing 1-0. So
yeah,
we have come some distance. That's a much better place. But again, it's just a question of whether we'll find a level of consistency this season. I do think it can happen. It's sort of the hope that kills you, isn't it? And I think...
Always is.
Yeah.
It's the same with every sport. It's the hope that kills you. You get sucked in and you get let down. That's basically sport all over. But it's worth it for the odd times that you do succeed.
Yeah. The glass half full, Kieran now says, we've got a really good run of fixtures. We could have a really good month and see ourselves fire into the top 3-4. And then you look at us, and if we get to Christmas and we're in the conversation and you go, actually, there's a lot of good players in this squad. We've got holes, but, Liverpool will this year now with Van Dijk out. City, they're going to have to keep the two strikers fit unless they sign another. Their midfield's a weird one. I didn't talk in the first half about Rodri, which I did want to do, but we'll come on to that, believe me, in another podcast.
Yeah.
But, there's no perfect squads this year, I don't think. So
no, there isn't.
If we can get there, then I'll feel really good. But again, you just hope that we can sort of stay in the conversation come Christmas, I think.
It's about loitering and lingering, to sort of take something from No Lane Up Golf live show last night. They were talking about players sort of jockeying for position on the leaderboard going into the final day. And that's what it's about, isn't it? Especially this season. There isn't going to be a runaway winner. It's about being in the conversation and being in position to sort of mount a charge, I suppose.
The best we've ever seen United obviously was under Sir Alex Ferguson, by quite a distance. But he, every season, would go into it, wanted good performances, and then we see where we are at Christmas. And then, I think he finished outside the top two twice in
Two-thirds, wasn't
area. So, it was a strategy that worked. If you can get into that conversation and you're in for a shot at the title.
You've got to time your run, haven't you? You've got to time your run. There's no use being top at Christmas and nowhere in May.
No. Yeah, you don't want to be the Justin Thomas of football, do you? This week at the Masters.
Exactly. You don't want to peak too soon. That's probably a rule in life, but you definitely don't want to peak too soon in the Premier League. Time your run. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah. I think there's a good chance that we'll click. And I think, I still think we'll get top 4 this year. I'm confident of that. It's just, again, question of when we click, I think, rather than if. So yeah, bring on West Brom, who will inevitably beat us 2-1 at home. So
Yeah, they've got a decent record at Old Trafford, West Brom. I think they beat us 2-1 in 2013. I think that's Moyes' first season. I think
they definitely did.
Something like that. So yeah, like you say, you've probably set us right up for the fall there. Moving on to a couple of the younger players that have had a bit of stick in the press past couple of days. Mason Greenwood and Marcus Rashford, to name the two sort of the young English players that have been built up and ready to get shot down by the press again. What do you make of the treatment they're having at the minute in the newspapers?
Predictable, isn't it?
Yeah, predictable is the right word, definitely.
I mean, people did predict it, but there was no one that didn't expect articles to be written about both of them. It stands for there's a lot of any young player really coming on the scene, like you say, they build them up and they want to knock them down. They always do that, but it does feel like some of it is reserved especially for black players, I find. I don't know what you would say about that. I don't know if you're comfortable with me saying that on the podcast. I know I talk about race quite a lot, but
yeah, that's fine. I mean, you're right. You're right in what you say. It's a national trend in this country, and black players and Manchester United players especially. I said to you over text, United players are held to a higher clip than everybody else. The microscope of scrutiny is turned up to another level when it's Manchester United, and like you say, black players, black sportsmen in this country. Raheem Sterling's had the same sort of treatment. It's not limited to United, and it's, for my money, it's a disgrace because we've all seen the comparison pieces of Daily Mail pieces written about Phil Foden compared with Raheem Sterling and Marcus Rashford and Mason Greenwood. It's chalk and cheese how they're portrayed, and it's totally wrong, and there's no reason for it.
And I was kicking myself back to last week's podcast because something I kept meaning to come on to but never said was when we were talking about the leaders. We obviously Marcus Rashford is one of these players that we should be talking about because the things he's off the pitch, but I've often thought that he'll one day be a United captain because on the pitch he does seem to have that about him too. But yeah, you're quite right. And again, this isn't just a problem in this country; it's a global problem. You talk about there's the shut up and dribble comment about LeBron James. I don't know if you're aware of, but when he made I think it was when he made his statement. But there's a lot of these people that do an awful lot of good for society, and again, there's nothing that they can do that will ever be enough. Marcus Rashford could not have been more apolitical in what he did. He did not take sides. He's come out and praised Boris Johnson after they've made the U-turn. It would have been very easy for him to come out and say, to sort of do a victory lap and sort of leave Boris Johnson hanging. Yeah, he easily could have done that, but the right thing to do was to,
let his actions do the talking. Yeah, it doesn't need to sort of, like you say, do a victory lap. He's done it. He's won.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, if he comes out and starts saying, too little, too late, or better late than never, or something along those lines, then you're harming the chances that any other good, you're burning that bridge with Boris Johnson, who, as it stands, is going to be Prime Minister till 2024. So again, it is a shame that the world is like this, but the world is like this. So I wasn't surprised in the slightest. I'll always be disgusted by it, but you just got to carry on. Again, I think the one good thing about today is that at least it does seem to get a bit more. This conversation is starting to happen on TV now. Sky do it, BT trying the best, they do it, and sometimes it's a bit transparent. You can really see through. Sometimes they go in a bit, but the fact that they're even trying to make a token effort sometimes is enough that they're trying to step in the right direction and maybe move the conversation.
I remember Neville sort of bringing it up a little bit. Maybe one of the first to do it about 18 months ago after a game. Was it a Spurs game? I seem to remember it being a Spurs game, but he went on a bit of a rant about the newspapers in this country. I think maybe the government.
Targeted the government.
He did, didn't he? Yeah, I seem to remember that. But like you say, maybe it's hard, isn't it, as a national broadcaster?
Almost giving him a bit of not just him, but Sky. I think there was a couple of games at the start of this season where the Black Lives Matter movement was still, every day on the news, and they really gave Micah Richards a good 5-10 minutes to really get everything off his chest. And I think Graham Souness was saying, that it was actually really good. Actually, I think the best thing that they've done out of all this isn't the Micah Richards having a chance to do a monologue or anything like that. The best thing that I've seen on TV was Graham Souness sort of do a double take at his own value system and almost look back at himself and think, I should have done this. But he was open enough to say he was sorry. He could show that he was moved by the movement and
that's what it's about. It's not about showcasing the good people. I say that in inverted commas, the people that are doing it correctly. It's maybe about trying to persuade people that aren't doing it correctly to do it correctly going forward. That's the biggest win, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, I always just think, if people see someone like Graham Souness come out and say, I've reflected on it, I regret what I did, and now, if you can see people brave enough to come out and say that after giving it thought, it does open the door for other people to sort of gradually move.
Well, of course it does.
I think so.
Of course it does. And people, everybody's human. Nobody's immune to making mistakes. And, there was a time where certain language and terminology and attitudes were the accepted stance in this country and across the world. We know now that wasn't right, but that was what was accepted. So for the people, especially of the older generation, the transition period is going to be something that takes a little bit of time. But if we can see moving to the, towards the right direction, and people being seen to, especially figures like Souness and people of a public stature being seen to make that movement, then that's progress, isn't it?
Yeah. Each one day at a time is all you can take it. I sympathise and I really do. It can get you down if you think too much about these people. They're not just like young. You think about how young Greenwood is. He's 19. He doesn't. Yeah, I'm only 8-9 years older than him, but
wasn't even alive when we won the treble. That's context.
But what do you really know at 19? And I'm not saying this is I know everything now, 9 years older, but you know what I'm saying. What can you what does he know about normal life, even in the sense that he's come through? People have known his name for 2-3 years now to an extent. Yeah. He was a big, everyone knew he was coming, sort of thing. He burst onto the scene, and I think the club did, make an attempt to sort of protect him a little bit. And I think probably explains a lot why Ollie's sort of rested him, and not actually had him come to games for a few the games this season. Yeah. I think I'd have wanted him there.
I think he's smart as well. I mean, I've been sort of pining for Greenwood a little bit because I'm, as you know, and you're on the same level as me, one of his biggest fans. I think he's great, but I think Ollie's smart to sort of use him a little bit sparingly and try his best to protect him a little bit. But even so, we're still seeing stories come out about him and papers try and knock him off his pedestal. We're not even going to sort of get into the sort of rumours circulating this weekend, but not even that far in terms of just his ill discipline, turn up late to training. As United got a problem with Mason Greenwood, blah blah blah. I mean, and Ollie's come out and had to say, no, he's fine. He's a good kid. He turns up on time. He's keen. He's X, Y, and Z. But the press seem to be out to sort of drag him over the coals for, and make up stories that just blatantly aren't true. For what reason? It's self-sabotage because this kid's going to be England's biggest hope in 5, 6, 7 years' time, seemingly, along with maybe Sancho, Sterling, Rashford. He's one of the main four names that are going to be bringing England forward. So to try and knock him down now, what's it serving? Sells papers. It's pathetic, really. To go full David Brent, it's pathetic.
There's a portion of the public, again, that do have the same values that your Daily Mails, the Sun have. So they're just providing the content for the consumers, aren't they?
Yeah.
I will say, though, again, all that really matters for Mason Greenwood is that, and Marcus Rashford and any other player that's going through it, we're talking about these two at United. But I'd also say, Paul Pogba again, because, we talk about it every week on this podcast. I think it's the first time we've mentioned him this week, which is rare.
Yeah.
We talk about it every week, but it's usually, it's always about football. For me, it's about how much I rate him and I wanted to see him. But the press, he can not play for 2 weeks and It's the first thing they talk about after our game if we lose every single time. It's constantly painting this picture, and there's nothing he can ever do. You know, a lot of people just assume he's lazy, or that he's an ego, or he's this and that and the other, and doesn't matter who you know. Everyone that seems to be close to him always comes out and says, no, he's actually really down to earth. But there's this picture painted of you know, again, particularly black football, because there is a stereotype that black players are lazy or ill-disciplined, or you know, all these.
Well, and we know this, and we know that Sky and BT and the broadcasters have been specifically told to move away from that sort of terminology because it's a stereotype, and it's not even a true one.
Which again, I'm really glad to see that. And I think the other thing, from a United perspective, it's actually nice to have a manager sort of the same mind, because I think our last manager almost stoked it a little bit. So I have to say, it's one of the other reasons that I think, you know, maybe the Ollie out brigade should maybe.
It doesn't fan the players' flames in the press, Solskjaer. He protects them at all costs. You never see him sort of.
It's very short and sweet when he's been asked about Greenwood over the last month or so. He's very. He's praised him. He's talked about how he's this, he's that. There were headlines coming out saying he was lazy, that he was late for training, and he came out and said categorically he's never been late for training. None of this is true. That's the sort of thing you want to see. You want to see him protecting your player. Whereas before, I feel like it was almost the case that, you know, Duncan Castles is well known to have, you know, very tight links to Jose Mourinho. And almost every day at one point was coming out with a different story about Paul Pogba. The only, you know, from close source, well, who could it have been? It was always going to be Jose Mourinho. So again, I'm it's one of the other reasons that, you know, other than the progress we've made as a club, that I'm really happy with, you know, the leadership at our club now. So, but yeah, no, I don't expect it'll ever stop. I don't expect it'll ever continue. I just think, I just really hope that, again, that the players that are subject to this, and again, not just the United players, obviously your Raheem Sterling's too. You know,
it's almost exclusively young English players, or the Venn diagram is Manchester United players, isn't it? And if the two cross, great. What a field day for the press.
I would say it's not even exclusive to sport either. You know, any walk of life. Again, not to sort of expose, but you know, your Meghan Markles, or you know, insert black British musician's name here. So you know, even MPs to an extent. So no one's really safe in that respect. So again, I just hope that again the conversation continues, and that we do continue to see progress. And it's why I'd like to see the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'd like to continue to see the player do the kneeling protest till the end of the season at the very least. So
yeah, and you know, I hear people say and read it on Twitter all the time, is this still going on? Are they still taking the knee? Well, yeah, because nothing's changed. So yes.
I think though, the people that say these things, why would they want it to stop?
Well, yeah. What bearing does it have on your life?
No, but I mean, you know, I'm thinking, you know, why does it bother them?
Yeah, and that's what I always think.
Often the people that it bothers are the people that, you know, would take a dim view to it. So
most likely, yeah. Have you got anything else to add, Kieran? Are you happy to round it off there?
Yeah, no, again, I think it's a sort of sullen note to end it on, but it is obviously relevant. It's
an important conversation that I think we needed to have, and sort of get our points across on what is clearly an issue and has been and will continue to be, unfortunately. But as we say, as long as the right progress is being made, that's all we can ask. So, all right, brilliant. We'll leave it there. But thank you very much for your contributions. No Kieran's hot take this week, but I'm sure it'll be back next week. We just couldn't fit it into the hour.
Cooling off period for everyone.
Yeah, it would have been Kieran's cool take this week, but I'm sure he'll heat the ovens up, back ready for next week. Kieran, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to this podcast, whether be it on YouTube, on iTunes, Spotify, any other podcast provider. It's greatly appreciated. As I say, we are trying out a little bit of new equipment. I've got the GoPro on the go today. Kieran's potentially setting something up from his end for next week. We'll see about that. But let us know if it works. If it doesn't work, what else you'd like to see. We're trying to sort of up our production value on this podcast and make it the best it can be for everybody that watches and listens. So any feedback is greatly appreciated. And thank you very much for taking the time to watch and listen. And join us again next week when we'll bring you episode 6 of season 3 of the Game of Two Halves podcast.